Isotope delivers a mirror finish, IWC glows throughout the night, Christie gets outed by a ransomware group, and Ulysse Nardin drops something that is very unfreakish. All this and more on today's show. Welcome to the Scottish Watches podcast. It feels like it's been a while, but it hasn't. Every week it feels like it has been a while because there's so much stuff happening day by day, night by night, because I work into the small hours, and Dave is working 1 hour ahead. He is in the future. He is going to be calling back in his little DeLorean from Switzerland because he is 1 hour ahead, British summertime, and he's stuck in the office. He's had to hang back. He has to use Raj's facilities, let's call it facilities, the little black broom cupboard. And any of our UK listeners that remember back in the day, Philip Schofield, before all that kind of stuff, when he had his hand up the bottom of a little gopher, we'll call it, there's a little broom cupboard, and Dave has got his own broom cupboard over in Switzerland at Raj HQ in Beale.
Luckily for Dave, he doesn't at this point in time have a hand up his arse, which is good if you're me, probably not so good if you want to laugh at me, but yes, he's in Beale. I am in the slightly larger holding cell. Previous establishment that I used to record from when I was here is a few stories above me, but we are now in our new facility, and we've now got a glorious amount of space.
Is this your glory hole?
I mean, it's a hole that can be glorious. As to whether it's a glory hole in the Ricky definition of glory hole, we'll leave that for the audience to decide.
Fair enough. And this is a good opportunity to tell you to check the show notes. There will be a link in the podcast player, and if you're watching this on YouTube, that link will be in the description. It will take you to our website. On there will be a page designated for this episode with pictures, links, tech spec, all that good stuff for all the things we're about to talk about. And there are a number of things going on. We thought we might have a bit of a lull as people licked their wounds, got themselves ready, and dealt with the Watch and Wonders hangover, but that is not the case. There are so many cool things, quite a lot of things happening on the British Isles, lots of new releases from brands that you know of if you've heard us speaking in the past, but we'll move straight into things. And Isotope is a brand we did a collab with a number of years ago. We spoke to Juicy a number of times prior to that. He's been on the show since then because we've had a limited edition in our charity watch auction. Auction news coming soon, not by us, but other people. And he is back with something incredible. He has obviously been hitting the headlines in recent times because each new release that comes out seems to be better than the last. And this time around, he has a watch that, in my eyes, I have never seen emulated. Perhaps it's been done in the past, perhaps not. Dave has a little bit more background knowledge on that going through the decades, but I have never seen a mirror finish dial in a mirror finish watch like this before.
I have to agree, I can't quite think of anything that certainly does what this watch does.
Tells the time.
Well, there's a few watches out there that don't tell the time very well, but that's a different matter. Indeed, I don't think I can remember another watch that does what this watch does to the same extent, as in the degree of polishedness, if that's such a word. That's a new word for David for today. The amount of polishing, the amount of this mercury liquid finish that's going on with it is everywhere. The dial, the case, every aspect of this watch you'll look at has got this almost liquid-like feel to it as well.
It's like a Terminator's cum shot on the dial.
I mean, yes, I was considering using that euphemism, but I thought I wouldn't, but you've done it, so we'll just go with it. Yeah, let's go with that. I think this watch is absolutely outstanding. There's a great article, and there'll be a link in the show notes. Check out the Scottish Watches. Scottish Watches? The Scottish Watches website.
The Scottish Watches show notes.
As we've got a great review of this watch written, I believe, by our compatriot Philogius, who was over in Geneva with us. I was trying to remember the city name. Over in Geneva with us at Watches and Wonders.
Shame you couldn't remember his actual name. Philologus.
Philogius.
Not Philogius.
Philo. We'll go with Philo.
Philo and Miz, right? The double act. The comedy double act of Scottish Watches. Philo and Miz.
And, unlike Miziel, Philo is very colour coordinated. We'll go with that. But yes, he's written a great article about it. So if you want a bit more detail and probably accurate details, including the tech spec, etc., check out the show notes to check out the link that will take you to the article on our website that will tell you all about it. Well, let's tell you about this watch. It's amazing. It's dressier than you would probably expect a watch to be from Isotope. The collab we did with them, very much a technical diver style watch. And most of the watches that he's put out over the last couple of years have definitely had a more utilitarian feel to them. Or a field watch. Certainly some of the bronze watches he's done have had that kind of military field watch feel to it. This is definitely dressy. And when I say dressy, think dressy in the fierce style of dressy. And that's not a dig at either company's. Veer's very well known for their classy, very elegant, dressy watches. This is more in a vein of that type of watch, but it does it extremely well. What can we say? 38mm by 10mm by, I think, 44.5 lug to lug, 20mm lug. So a nice, not too small, but more delicate size than you would expect typically from Isotope. And mirror polishing everywhere. Mirror polish convex dial, mercury leaf hands, liquid metal teardrop logos, stepped curve lugs. Still got that 100-meter water resistance on there, so pretty utilitarian for day-to-day wear. It comes in a really nice grey suede strap that does fit in with this whole polish, silver, mercury, liquid metal type look going on about it. I just think it is an absolutely great looking watch. It will reflect every surface. So if you get one, or if you buy one, or if you get one that you want to take a photo of, good luck with that, because this, I think, might be a bit of a nightmare to photograph and not get any reflections or bounce back or all of the other annoyances you usually get from that shiny part of watches.
But I'm thinking this could be the ideal school watch. Now cast your mind back to the time when you were in school and the teacher was annoying you. So you would take your watch and you would aim the sunlight into their eyes. It wasn't really as powerful as you wanted. You know, it didn't cause any retinal damage, and that's retinal, not rectal. With this, you could definitely take out a couple of those, what would you call it? You could definitely take out a couple of blood vessels in the back of someone's eye.
It is definitely in the shinier, polished end of the spectrum. Spec-wise, it's got the Landron movement, which he has, I say he, that being Ulysse, has been using in most of the watches that they do. That is a kind of modified ETA 7001 movement. Manual winding, as you would expect from that kind of thinner 10mm watch. 3 Hz running at, 42-hour power reserve. Lightly, I was going to say punchy, but that's the wrong word. Slightly more expensive a price point than you might expect typically from the watches from Isotope. This one coming in at $2,400 US, limited to 150 pieces. But I think the price for what you're getting here is actually still a bargain, frankly. I think he's priced it to be super competitive. I think this is an absolute win. I am so pleased for him. I know he's one of the hardest working guys in the watch industry. He pretty much does everything himself, and he throws himself at it wholeheartedly. Not a nicer guy will you meet. As nice people, sure, but you won't meet a nicer guy than him. He really does put himself out there and tries really hard for it. So, yeah, Ricky, your thoughts on this one?
I really do like it. 38mm, so it appears small, but because it is brightly coloured, as in it will reflect lights and colour around, it will look bigger. Like a white watch look bigger versus a black watch, you're going to win there. It's going to be a fingerprint magnet on the actual case itself and the lugs. You're not going to be able to put a fingerprint on the dial unless you break it, but hopefully that does not happen. It's just something that I've not seen before. And the tie-in with the kind of mercury droplet, like a T2 once Arnie blows it apart and it starts to come back together again. That on the dial is a win. And again, pictures don't really do this justice because it's impossible to take a proper picture. Video clips are better. Getting it in real life will be the best option. And it is a total departure in every single way from all the watches of the past that Isotope have produced. Our one, other ones, I remember before we even had them on the show, he sent us a couple up to check out. You've obviously bought them in the past. I had never seen them before. They're just incredible, and everyone is different. So in the show notes, we will force Miz to put pictures of prior iterations from his back catalogue, plus the current range. We've been talking about Christie's only watch and various cyber shenanigans over the past couple of weeks, and we had some ideas, thoughts and feelings on things. We got the expert to come in on things. That was Patrick Gray from the best cybersecurity podcast going, in my humble opinion. That is Risky Business. And he came back and said there was a couple of things that maybe we hadn't thought of. That was in his show. And it turns out he was on the money. Because this week, we've not heard anything from Christie's. We've not heard anything from the Only Watch team because they wouldn't really know about it. But we have heard from a ransomware crew. And they have outed the auction house. They have explained what they stole, what they have. They have published a sample data set. And they've also said that they had been in talks, negotiations with the auction house about paying the ransom in order to save the blushes of the 500,000 customers of Christie's. That'll be buyers, sellers, everybody that's involved in the auction process, because they have got everything down to the IDs that have been provided, if that's passport, driving licenses, all that kind of stuff, of the folks that spend hundreds of thousands, millions, and up the way. So Dave, you know a little bit about this because we've been talking about it behind the scenes. How bad is it?
No one really knows quite how bad it actually is at this point in time, but all signs point to this being potentially very, very bad for lots of people. Christie's definitely being at the forefront of being the bad, well, I wouldn't say bad guys, but they're the bad guys that they've let this happen. So yes, absolutely seems that someone's got in behind that firewall.
They never updated their Norton antivirus.
Dear, oh dear, oh dear. But yes, someone's got, as Ricky mentioned, 500,000 customers worth of data, and that data is valuable. I'm also going to guess that, auctions being what auctions are, this is not aimed at Christie's or any auction houses, but auctions being what auctions are, there's sometimes certain people who have lots of, let's say, money that they want to remove from circulation or from their circulation. And let's say that they're probably not going to be best pleased when their information or data ends up in the wild. So yes, I've got the feeling there's kind of scenes that involve people in beds and horses' heads and this kind of thing that might happen. It appears from a little screenshot. Check the show notes out. It's been redacted to a certain extent to protect some data, but basically it gives you the flavour of what's going on. They're saying, we tried, very businesslike, we tried to come to a reasonable agreement with them after stealing their data, that is, to get paid and not release the data. But apparently they went quiet on them.
From what I can gather, and I'm not the expert in this subject, when people get ransomed and they pay the bounty, generally what is promised happens because the knock-on effect of negative publicity to say we paid a ransom and they still did what they said they wouldn't means that in the future other businesses are unlikely to pay the ransom. So there is that kind of unwritten rule. Who knows what will happen in this case? This is slightly different because in my head, the people that have been affected by the breach are also people that could pay a ransom. And there have been so many of these things over the past. There have been medical records released from therapists and healthcare providers. There have been just all kinds of stuff, even to the point where when one place did not pay the ransom, the person that had infiltrated and stolen all that data got in touch with the people inside the actual data that was collected and tried to individually ransom them. So yeah, a bit of a dodgy one this. Hopefully things are going to right themselves. And we've been speaking with Patrick behind the scenes, and he's going to come on and give us a little bit more insight into the murky world of ransomware. Because you know what it's like. We love tech, we love mechanisms, we love cars, bikes, planes, trains, and automobiles. So that'll be a good one. And we should probably talk about something we got a little bit of a sneaky peek at a couple of months ago. And that was from Ulysse Nardin. And they are most famous for the Freak. That's the watch I've got. That's the one that they were highlighting at Watches and Wonders. But they have tons in their collection. They have tons on display when you go into their boutiques or you walk into Watches of Switzerland and you look in that area where all the cool independents are. We're going to talk about the new releases that we're now allowed to announce to the public.
The brand is well known for the Freak. They've taken the Freak out of Freak and they've gone with their divers watches. Two introductions. There's the Diver Net Ops and the Diver X Skeleton Ops. Again, along that feel and vibe of these kind of military special forces type feel to it. Again, using the colour palette that you would probably expect from that more military orientated theme, that being this olive drab green. Both of these watches I really like. I'm a big fan of the Diver's watch. It gets nothing like the coverage that the Freak gets, because obviously the Freak is the Freak and it is the big darling in the range. But the Diver is a watch that, when you compare it to many other brands out there, is certainly at the more affordable end of the Ulysse Nardin range. And along with that, it's parably priced to things that you might pay for, say, an Omega. Something like their Planet Oceans, typically these days, can definitely stretch into the low five figures. So with this, you can get the Diver Nets Op, I believe, for in and around 13,000. So yes, still a huge sum of money, no two ways about it. But typically what you'd be expecting from Ulysse Nardin is maybe pushing towards the 20 and above, which is quite often where you see the Freak X's, etc. Now, a brand that is independent, they, along with their related co-brand, that being Girard-Perregaux, kind of bought back their freedom from the Kering Group a few years ago, and they're doing their own thing. And it really does seem that both of those brands are rolling hard and doing their own thing and doing it well. Definitely, you've got Girard-Perregaux doing the slightly dressier, maybe competing with the likes of your APs out there, something a bit more formal. And you've got Ulysse Nardin doing the crazy, the proper, almost, I guess, like, maybe we could call it MB&F Light, and I don't think that's offending either brand. Getting that feeling vibe of something a bit sci-fi, a bit out there, but using real cool technologies and doing things differently because they can. And why can they? Well, UN as a brand, they were the pioneers of silicon use in watches. And I'm not talking about silicon for decoration, although they do a lot of that as well. I'm talking about the silicon for the component movement parts. That really was the proper forefront of technology and still is. Many brands, many movements out there still do not have full silicon technology. They very much do. So yeah, I absolutely love the look of these. We were very lucky. We got to see these watches over at Watches and Wonders. We were sworn to secrecy. How it stayed secret with Nico having as big a mouth as he has and being as loud as he has?
It's because the filming that I was doing was so shaky. It looked like there had been some kind of, I don't know, crazy seismic shift in the tectonic plates. The amount of wobble that was produced due to him sitting down and talking shite.
By God, the boy is loud. Anyway, yes, these watches, super cool. That original Diver's Net was a concept watch, I think, 4, maybe 5 years ago. I think it was around 2020. And in 2023, there was a couple of freak ops style watches that get put into the range. In fact, pretty sure we've talked about them at least once or twice because we loved seeing those watches as well. Ops, by the way, being operations, that kind of military jargon for going on operations. Tech spec in here, 300 metres of water resistance, as I think you would like to hope from a kind of operations military themed watch as well. It's got their own UN 118 automatic caliber in there.
Is that the 118 118?
118 118.
Does a guy deliver it wearing a mustache and like a marathon top? Is that an old joke, Dave?
That's a very old joke.
From the old jokes home?
I think, the old jokes home. Yeah, you will go to the old jokes home if you're not careful. I think, to be honest, knowing him and how kind of up for a laugh he is as the CEO, if you were to ask him to dress up in that and deliver the watch to you, there's a remote possibility he might actually do it. Anyway, moving on there. The other thing with their silicon technology, they use a bit of a cool little trick. Diamond Sil, it's an ultra high-tech patented process with a diamond coating on the silicon. Super high-end use of silicon. These guys, compared to anyone else who's using silicon, these guys really are driving that forward. Lots of special materials, lots of recycled materials, lots of fancy materials, all being forced into this watch, which actually on the wrist ends up looking like a really classy, low-keyed, almost camouflage watch. $13,300 US, and the skeletonized version, bit more pricey, coming in at $27,500 US, but it's got a few more tricky things going on. Carbonium as materials, and obviously that skeletonizing. 2 crack-a-looking watches. Check out the show notes.
And as an add-on to all the stuff we've just talked about there with UN, like I've said in the past, it was a brand I always thought was on the upper echelons price point wise, as well as obviously movement technology and finishing. But it turns out when you're talking 12, 13 grand, which is not insignificant, but we are talking decent Rolex money, decent Omega money, like you say, Planet Ocean, and you've got a collection of different brands that operate in and around that price point. Perhaps it's entry level. You've got your Moser, Pioneer, you've got, I don't know, you've got stuff from Arm & Strom around about there, and you've also got UN. So these are attainable brands, just slightly up from your Tudors, your base Omegas, and your base Rolex. But we should probably move on to something else, Dave.
Okay, Ricky, you said 118, 118. I'm going to talk 911, 911. What you got to say about that?
Is this an American emergency, or are we talking the latest and the greatest from Stuttgart in Germany?
We're talking the Porsche.
Oh, okay. So it just so happens that today, the day we are recording the show, which is 2 days ahead of schedule, which is pretty good for me, because usually it's the night before, the new Porsche 911 has been announced and all the videos have come out. The first thing I noticed with their live stream on YouTube was just how horrific it was put together, how stale and cardboard cut out the not even actors, the presenters were. They involved Matt Watson from CarWow as part of it, and he was the most polished of the lot of them, but you could tell it wasn't his team behind the scenes editing up the video and the inserts. But all the hullabaloo this time around with the new revision of the 992 series is they have incorporated hybrid technology. We're not going to go into it. This is not a car podcast as much as we like to delve into different areas. but they have done something a little bit different. They have tricked out their turbocharger technology with the use of batteries. So they have got all the things you would want in a car. The price point hasn't jumped up as much as you would think, and this kind of gets them past a lot of the Euro emission control issues that seem to be plaguing lots of automobile manufacturers currently. So well done to Porsche for that. And if you want to find out more, obviously check out the show notes. But speaking of 911s, Porsche, and perhaps not the latest and the greatest and the newest, but going back in time, there's this guy, he started a blog maybe 16 years ago. He's into his vintage air-cooled Volkswagen Beetle stroke 911s. He's had a tough time of it because there was an article in, I believe, the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times, something that was paywalled through the arse, so I could only really peer through the letterbox and read the first couple of paragraphs until somebody kindly donated a PDF on our WhatsApp group. But Hodinkee have been in for a little bit of shit from the mass media. What's going on here?
Indeed. So it appears that a few folk have decided to almost, in some respects, use Hodinkee as the target of an article that should probably, in my opinion, have been more about the general industry, and that the watches are maybe not quite as buoyant as they had been and have been over the last 5-6 years. The market's a bit tougher, the real world's coming into the play with things like inflation and everything else, and the world is post-COVID. People are going on holidays and they're now spending less money than they were on watches because they've got other better things to do with their money. Now, Hodinkee, it's fair to say, are getting it pretty tight, especially in the Wall Street Journal article, where effectively they're saying they were a good thing, they were a big thing, they've been going for 16 years and they are probably on their way out, is a broad synopsis of what it says. It says they've made lots of bad business decisions, bad buying decisions, whether that be Crown and Caliber, whether that be the alleged retail unit they have in New York that they're paying up to $80,000 a month for, that has never been used and or is empty and is sitting with stickers on its window, and obviously with huge changes to their staffing, lots of people being let go both in their Crown and Caliber business and in Hodinkee itself, and really just saying, hey, you've played it badly, guys, and it looks you're in a bit of trouble. Ben Clymer definitely getting it pretty tight in there. It doesn't feel quite like a hit article on him, but he's definitely part of the targeting of this as well. It's interesting because it did feel like a little bit of a pile-on, especially a lot of the US press seemed to have kind of jumped on it. Someone who's usually not shy of a sensationalist story, though, that being someone based in the UK, took actually a much more pragmatic view of it, and I think wrote one of the more balanced pieces that I've read about this whole thing. He said for sure, maybe there's been some not so great things done and some bad decisions taken, but he's saying that he doesn't want to be part of the pile-on. We obviously can't put the PDF onto the show notes because it's paywalled and other people's writings, but you can find it if you go hunting. Google will definitely be your friend, and I'm sure there's more than a few little WhatsApp groups that might be able to furnish you with the writings if you so ask them.
I don't think this article, it didn't hit the mark. It's like when a journalist has a limited amount of time to write something in an area that perhaps they're not well versed, it's not their core subject matter, and when it comes to newspapers, online publications, unless it's something to do with a field that they're in, perhaps watch journalism or automotive journalism or whatever it is, the broad strokes don't really tell you what falls down behind the couch and into the cracks. And with Hodinkee, I've never had a problem with the fact that they got Crown and Caliber and they never predicted that the meteoric rise of the pre-owned market was about to flounder. Nobody saw that coming, just as much as nobody saw it rising. That's not the issue. The issue I've always had personally is the way that they've lost their way editorial-wise. It was always the first, when Scottish Watches first became a thing, Hodinkee was the first place I would check in the morning. I would go on and have a look at their Instagram, have a look at their website, read things to completion. Back when Cole Pennington was there, Stephen Pulverant was there was a whole load of folks that you could really get your teeth into the story. Now, as I've said a number of times, it's more puff pieces, fluff pieces. You're reading it wondering why you're reading it. You're wondering where it's going. Horological Dictionary a number of years ago took to task something about one of the journalists had written that a certain Tudor watch is the kind of watch that you would wear if you were an officer on a dusty base. Random stuff like that. Then there was the Chopard Alpine Eagle article that I talked about that lots of people were scratching their head going, where does this come in? This is fashion mixed with this, mixed with that. We just love watches. And when we go around all the different blogs, we like to see the themes that they bring. It could be monochrome, it could be Fratello, it could be Time and Tide. We check all these places out on an almost daily basis. We're checking their Instagrams all the time. And it only seems to be Hodinkee that doesn't quite know where it is. It doesn't, it's 16 years old. It's finding itself. It is just in that little space before it knows where its career wants to be. And as much as you're saying, it's never going to get back to where it was, it could definitely retract slightly from the whole fashion and Met Gala and who's wearing this to the Oscars and come back to things people want to actually give a about. That would be great. And I'm going to put out the call that if Ben Clymer is listening, which I hope he does, but if he's not and somebody knows him, I would love to bring him onto the show so me and Dave could have a chat. We had Cara on for episode 250, I believe it was, and we had a really good conversation. In the past, we've had various different staff members from the past and the present. And yeah, we'd love to have a conversation. We wouldn't run a steamroller over things. It wouldn't be a hit piece. We're not known for that. We're nearly 600 episodes and 6 years down the road with things. That is not our MO. So if Ben is interested in coming on to chat, we'll even give him editorial control of the edit process. So if he says something by accident, he can remove it. So that is an open invitation if you'd love to come on and have a chat with us, because we do love Hodinkee. I've bought their limited editions. When it's merited, we give them a bit of a slap. When they've done amazing things, we commend them. Like Hodinkee 10 was one of the standout things of my entire watch history from 2017 forward. Loved it, loved what they did. And it's just a shame that they seem to have lost their footing slightly. But moving on to something else, and a brand that has certainly not lost their footing. In fact, they are screaming ahead with a Formula One icon wearing a very punchy watch on the wrist. Something that we've not really seen before from them, from what I can tell. Something we've very rarely seen from anybody else. But these guys have done it in a different way, using a different methodology. And I really like what I see. It's just a shame we can't get one.
That Formula One star being Lewis Hamilton. And obviously, he is driving for a team primarily sponsored in terms of watches by IWC at this point in time. And sadly, he will be moving on from that team at the end of this season. What are we talking about? Serra luminous ceramic watch technology and prototype. It's amazing. It's absolutely killer here. This is a watch that looks, on the face of it, to be white ceramic. Now, they didn't introduce white ceramic that long ago. As we know, in the Pilot's watches, they had a couple of really strong white ceramic numbers that they brought into the range. This one is a whole different ballgame, though. As it's sitting in the sun all day, as the sun goes down, as it begins to darken, as you walk into that dark nightclub room, this explodes in luminous glory. This watch is unbelievable. You do need to check out the show notes. You do need to check out any links that Miziel manages to get into the show notes as well to see what this is actually all about. They've effectively taken their ceramic technologies. They've then mixed this. This is their engineering division, which is XPL. And they have brought the luminous materials. They've mixed it through this ceramic mix and managed to produce cases where it quite literally looks like ceramic. It is ceramic. It's got all of the properties you would like from ceramic, but they've evenly mixed all of that bright luminous material through it, and it glows, from the pictures I've seen, like nothing on earth. How long it lasts? No idea. Probably not as long as you want it to last, but it is absolutely visually stunning when you see it kick off. So yes, check out the show notes to see what we're talking about, because this is killer. It's not a production watch at the moment. It is a technology prototype. I'm sure this will end up in the range at some point. They're not going to do this as a one-off. They're not going to invest the money they've probably had to invest in the technology to make this as a one-off. If they get this in the range in a watch I like, I will buy one. It's so cool.
As I'm listening to this, I am thinking of good friend James Thompson, the Black Badger, the Loom King, the guy that knows how to create things that glow and glow for a long time. And it's just strange that his name is not associated with this, because usually behind the scenes, when we find something to do with Loom Tech, he is there. He is somewhere in the background. It could be TAG, it could be Zenith, it could be MBNF, it could be Hot Launch, it could be anybody at all. He is usually there, hiding away. But this time around, nothing to do with it. But as Dave rightly says, We've done a number of podcasts with the guys at IWC over the past 4 years. We had Chris Granger on, we have spoken with Grant, we have covered the road shows both down south and in Edinburgh twice. We've interviewed Chris across at Watches and Wonders. That episode is coming soon. And we went across. We did a factory tour. We got to check out their museum and how they actually put these things together. So we have a good knowledge, a good working relationship with them because they're one of the good guys. A lot of brands will not let you go behind the scenes. A lot of brands will not let you speak to the man at the top. These guys have. These guys have had open door policy since day one and it is to be respected because not a lot of folks do that. This looks incredible. The only thing I don't like, because there's always a slight negative, the only thing I don't like, well, two things. One, you can't buy the bloody thing, which is a real shame because I'd love to get a hold of that. And the second thing is they don't have the ceramic pushers. It still looks like stainless steel, but that is a very, very minor thing. And I suppose at night time, if you were looking at the case, you wouldn't want asymmetry by having the pushers at the side also been luminous. From what I can gather, reading various things about it, they say up to 24 hours worth of lume, so it's going to glow in the dark for 24 hours, which is pretty good. And it's going to look like the very start of The Simpsons, when Homer is finishing work, and that bit of plutonium kind of rotates in the air and lands on him as he leaves the building. A fantastic looking watch. These guys are doing great things. Stay tuned.
So here we've got an email that maybe is talking about something that we talked about in last week's You and Me episode.
Is that because it's about you and your willful, wanton waste of money? Because you decided to buy an air conditioning unit for your neck and we stay in Scotland, which means summer has passed and those 48 hours were glorious a couple of weeks ago. But you're right, we have got an email in here from Mark Turner and he says, subject, personal aircon prices. £110 British is a waste. $4,000 on one's fourth Tudor is great value. I love watch people. So there you go. Nothing more can be said apart from yes. And there have been quite a lot of emails coming in. We won't have time to go through them all. But when I gave the call out to tell people, get in touch, let us know what you think, let us know your thoughts, feedback, your comments, your criticism, your questions. We'll try and provide as many answers as we can. You guys got in touch and the doors are still open. Drop us an email, info@scottishwatches.co.uk if you've got something you want to get off your chest.
So we forgot to do this last week, much to someone's annoyance, that someone being busy. Also, Ricky, what are you wearing on your wrist? Because I am definitely coming second, possibly up your back.
So it's wrist check time. We've not done this for a wee while. And yes, we always try and put it at the start of the show, but it always ends up gradually slipping like a landslide further and further in. And you do like it deep. So today I am wearing a watch that I alluded to on the previous episode of the show. That's when we were talking all things aviation, Concorde, Brooklands and land speed, plus water speed technology and world records. This is a watch from Aviate, which is part of Vishal at Spinnaker's group, including Nubeo, Aviate, Spinnaker, and a whole host of other little micro brands that are all rolled in there. And this one is pretty cool because it takes me back to my childhood, back when Meccano, Lego, and Airfix were the three major things that somebody in Britain would have if they were mechanically minded and they wanted to create things on their own. Moving up the scale from Duplo. So this is the Hawker Hurricane Mark 1 Airfix from Aviate, and that is a bit of a mouthful, but this watch is a bit of a wristful. It is a big monster on the wrist. It comes in very inexpensively at just over £200 UK. And if you look at the dial, which will be in the show notes and potentially in the thumbnail for this and obviously on YouTube, you can see that in the background, if you peer in there, behind the subdials, behind the big logo, you will see the Airfix plastic, where you used to have to break out the little parts, the miniature parts that you would then join together, affixing using glue or other substances. Dave knows what I'm talking about. And then afterwards, you would go through the painstaking process of painting those parts to emulate what was on the cover and what it is you actually wanted to have initially. Sometimes that didn't quite work out. Sometimes people would get bored halfway along the way and you'd end up with an unpainted mess on your windowsill or on your bookshelf. But this is a great callback to the past. And Vishal at Spinnaker is known for doing this. He's done it with Capcom, he's done it with Space Invaders, he's done it with 1942, 1943. He is a man of the 80s, a child of the 80s, and you can definitely see that here We spoke about it briefly on the last show, and that is one that I would recommend everybody goes to check out, because we don't only talk about watches, we don't only talk about fast things. We had a fantastic author, and not just an author, a pilot of merit, someone who was the chief pilot for Concorde back in the day, which unfortunately retired over 20 years ago. The aircraft did, not so much him, but it is an episode you'll want to go back and check out if you haven't already.
Yes, indeed. This is the Hawker Hurricane, a classic chronograph Airfix edition. Colour, Deco Grey. It is the AV4011-1C. 211 of your British pounds. So unlike other watches we may have been talking about today at slightly more punchier price points, this one definitely is very much affordable. I think most people listening to this, if they like it, would probably be able to scrape the pennies together to get one. It's a Japanese quartz chronograph movement in there, stainless steel watch, 43.5, 11mm thick. Not ridiculous. That quartz chronograph module will be helping with the thickness. 50-50 lug to lug. Quite big, but not ridiculous for a 43.5mm sized watch. And everything else you want to know, 22mm lug width, 50 metres water resistance. It weighs 90 grams and it has a 2-year international warranty. So if you want one, check out the show notes to have a look at the pictures. Probably don't hang about, because a lot of his watches tend to sell out quite quickly because they are very well priced.
We love to cover watches at all price points, so something at around about 200 quid versus something around about 200 grand. There is a bit of a discrepancy price-wise and pocket-wise, but we know that people that have got cool watches like to have beater watches, less expensive watches, and some people are just getting into the whole wearing something on the wrist. So £200, if it tickles your fancy, go and grab it, because it is pretty cool. So I suppose I should actually ask that Dave guy what he's got on the wrist today.
Yes, you should. What's David wearing? And he's going to keep this short because he's got a point to make. He is, well, it's off his wrist now, but he is wearing his Moser Streamliner. It's back into David's irregular rotation. Unfortunately, I don't have my fancy top-down camera here, so I'm trying to miss the light. There we go. Hopefully you can see that now. That is that dragon green dial on there. And why am I wearing this?
Did they not bring that back out again, but slightly different?
They did. They had retired the green. This is the original with the very visible Moser logo on there. They brought out the Stealth Edition, which has still got the logo, but it's not been backfilled with white. So you have to catch it in the light correctly in order to see that logo. But yes, that's back in the range, I believe, for 1 year. Not sure if it'll hang about longer than that, but possibly for 1 year as well. Because as we know, Moser's logo is, what is it? Thingy rare? Is it incredibly rare? No.
Very rare.
Is it very rare? It is very rare, isn't it? Yeah. Because as we know, Moser's little catchphrase is very rare.
Just like how we like our steaks.
Absolutely. I definitely like them blue more than rare, but yeah, I agree with you there. And why am I wearing it and why am I talking about it? Because we have to defend a compatriot in the watch space, that being Sam from Casual Watch Reviews. Because Ricky and myself sometimes make an appearance on a Sunday on his Casual Watch Talk that he does every Sunday. It's 9:30 UK time in the evening, so it's late for me and Ricky, but it's daytime in the US when they do it. And the last little talk we had, Ricky wasn't on it, but I got onto it. We were talking about some of the stuff we've been talking today, the Hodinkee article, and somebody has attacked not just Sam, but me personally. And I would take great pleasure in saying this person said that, quote, the Christopher Ward is the size of a dustbin lid, and personally, I love the Moser. In fact, I love all Mosers. But the guy doesn't have any style, so he doesn't complement the watch. In fact, he makes it look so cheap. So I am so thankful. I try my hardest to make things look cheap. Quite often when you see Ricky naked, he looks very cheap. In fact, he doesn't even charge me. So yes, I'm very much about doing cheap things. So thank you so much. Very normal man, I think you are on Instagram. So I'm just going to call you out for it.
I'm glad that my VPN hid my tracks well on that one, Dave. But moving on from there, things that we've been up to, and we'll be quick because there's a whole load of watch content. I've been having a good giggle at Google's expense this week. And I know you were recently there, and we do talk about AI because it's quite funny. And what's even more funny is when you type things into Google these days and you expect some kind of answer that is truthful, that isn't based in fantasy. But what you've been getting back has been incredible. Some of the things people have been typing in is, how many rocks per day should the normal person eat? And the reply back is 2 to 3 rocks. Or, how do I make the cheese in my food slightly thicker? And the answer back is to put in some glue. Or the best one I saw recently was, is it okay to leave a dog in a hot car with the windows up? Yes, it is. Turns out AI features in a feature film. I saw a new one that was on Netflix and it's called Atlas, features J-Lo. It's been panned in the press as being a bit shit. I thought it was okay. I don't think it was too bad. And a little bit like The Creator and various things like that, it shows you what's going to happen with AI when AI is put into robotic humans, humanoids, or cyborgs. Yeah, something to check out if you're bored on a Saturday or Sunday night. And to round out my watching pleasures, I caught up with an episode of VinWiki where they had one of the guests on talking about automobile shenanigans, and this time around it was cheating in the world of rallies. And I may have mentioned this in the past, I have a hazy memory about it, but one of the biggest rally cheat scandals was around about 1995, 1996 in the WRC, when the greatest cheat, as proclaimed by the folks at the FIA, was when Toyota Team Europe decided to get some extra air in their lungs by creating a restrictor plate that when a hose clip or a Jubilee clip was placed on top of it to clamp it down, it would slide forward 5mm, allowing extra airflow and an extra 50 horsepower. But as soon as you took it off for scrutineering and the engineers looked at it, everything was tickety-boo. Fantastic video, goes into lots of detail. Dave is giggling away there because he was into rallying, actually competed at a good level back in the day. You probably remember all about this when it first hit the headlines.
I do indeed, because that is a genius piece of engineering, albeit cheating engineering. But yes, as you pushed on the intake and tightened up that Jubilee clip, the restrictor slid forward, opening it up from the pre-designated FIA regulations to a much bigger, much suckier turbocharger. And of course, when they went to check it, what did they have to do? Unscrew the clamp, pull off the hose and measure it, by which point it had miraculously shrunk back into the turbocharger and measured up perfectly. In fact, if I remember rightly, they were only caught because somebody dobbed them in. They didn't actually technically even find out. They got grassed on, as they would say in Scotland.
They got to the second last, the penultimate race of the season when somebody dropped them in the shit. And it's a bit of a mixed bag. The FIA were glowing when they were showing people. They were like, oh my God, look how ingenious this is. This is fantastic. But you're banned next season.
They got absolutely hammered for it and they get kicked out. But hey, it is always just shows you what these ingenious little engineers can get up to. So before we move on to a couple more bits of watch news before we round this up, I will just round out by saying, yes, two things. Car related again. My car is becoming like my phone or my computer.
Full of porn. Absolutely.
In the glove box, under the seat, under the mat.
All those magazines weighing down the back end, popping out the springs.
Yeah, you've got to do it old school. Paper porno mags has to be done that way.
In a bush.
In a bush. In a bag, inside out. Plastic Presto's bag. Anyway, yes, my car is getting like my phone or computer. Every time I get in it and turn it on, it tells me it needs an update. And that update will run. It tells me it takes 2 minutes. 30 minutes later, it's still running. So it's definitely like a Windows computer. It got an upgrade to the latest version of ChatGPT, which is something that you absolutely don't need in your car, but it is absolutely hilarious, especially when it gives you advice like, how should I go to X destination? And it decides to take you via London for no apparent reason, when where you want to go is a mere 2 or 3 miles up the road. So yes, it's maybe not quite as advanced as it should be. And big plaudits to the brave guy that I passed in the airport as I was flying to Beale, who decided to wear a proud Boeing t-shirt as he was striding through the airport. I hope that guy's the one that sits next to the door that's not really a door, because if he supports Boeing that much, good on you, big man. Outside of that, I've not watched anything other than junk on my iPad because I've been flying. So maybe we should talk about something that's not junk, a Dunkirk watch that I believe really took my fancy from Williamwood.
And mine as well. There, I'm using Dave's catchphrases ahead of him. We had Johnny Garrett from Williamwood on the show back when we were at British Watchmakers Day. He was one of the folks, one of the victims, I suppose you could call them, who I managed to drag in front of the cameras and have a quick chat, because it's been a number of years since he'd been on the show properly. Yes, he appeared when we did our watch auction. There was no shenanigans that time. And since then, we've been communicating. He's now based over in France with his wife, The trail hasn't run cold. He has been producing watches, but he's back with something completely unique, just as much as the last watch looked completely unique to everything else he'd done prior to that. And this one, I don't even know how to describe it. I have no clue whatsoever, but Dave is more a military man than I am, so he's going to give it a good bash.
So what is this? Obviously, check out your history, we'll touch on it, but Dunkirk was that moment at the very start of the Second World War where unfortunately the Germans decided to commit a bit of blitzkrieg, charging their way across Europe and into France, and the British expeditionary forces were pushed back onto the beaches and had to be rescued from the Dunkirk beaches by a flotilla of military and civil vessels that were sent over to rescue them, whilst 40,000 of those French soldiers bravely defended them so they could get off the beaches. Now, one of those boats the Royal Navy had apprehended for the rescue, one of those being London Fire Brigade's fireboat, the Massey Shaw. This was in the area which was doing fire support for, funnily enough, boats in the water, but it was told, get yourself over and get as many British soldiers back on and back over to the UK as you possibly can. So they've done a watch to talk all about this episode in history. A very dark day for many people, but one that did save many a life and meant that Britain could continue to fight back during the Second World War. I love this watch. There's so many little design cues in it that just really work. It sounds like it could be super cheesy.
Like the end of your cock.
I mean, yes. The flanks of this watch have a description that they're based upon the fire cannons on the sides of the boat. Don't know how else to describe it. It sounds like it should be truly, truly terrible. Sorry, Johnny. But it's not terrible. It works amazingly well. Between the colour palette of the watch, with these bright red, fire-orientated colours, and then the more subdued, I guess almost earthy tones of the rest of the watch, I just think this really, really works as a watch. It shouldn't. Johnny's done a few watches in his range that have really appealed to me. Most of them are not necessarily in my aesthetic palette. Quality's amazing, but this watch screamed at me when I saw it. I think you're probably going to agree with me in that it shouldn't work, but it does, Ricky.
I'm conflicted trying to describe what this looks like, and again, hopefully we can include this in the thumbnail for this episode, because it's a watch like no other. I don't mean just within the catalogue from William Wood and what they've done in their past, but generally, it just doesn't, it looks like a World Time, it looks like perhaps something that Montblanc might put out, but then it's got something from the Alaska project, it's got like a red shroud around it, so words will not do this justice, pictures will probably not do it justice, but we'll do our best to include as much content in the show notes as possible. Love this, got a sneaky peek of it a couple of months back when I get sent a PDF on WhatsApp. That was a render. This is far better. And again, it shows that William Wood aren't just doing the same old stuff. People had it in their heads. How long can they produce firefighter watches? How long can they produce things to do with emergency services? But like Studio Underdog, where people may say or think one trick pony, William Wood and Rich at Studio Underdog consistently produce the goods. Different watches, different looks, different feels, perhaps all with a theme that underlies, but just the proof is in the pudding. Look at the thing. It's absolutely incredible looking, and hopefully I can get one up to play with. And Johnny got in touch to say it has been too long. It has been far, far too long, and he's going to appear on the show in the coming months. Perhaps when he's got something else to talk about apart from this one.
So to round out the specs in this, 42mm brushed bronze case, that gives you those earthy tones, 13mm in height. That's to represent the Massey Shaw's engine room. You've got these red pipes, as they're called, wrapping around either side that kind of resembles this fire hose area of the boat as well. It's just a great looking watch. 50 meters water resistance, limited to 600 pieces. It's running a Sellita SW200 top grade movement in there as well. I think it's amazing. Price point just shy of 4,000 UK, 5,172 US dollars, with deliveries commencing from November 2024 to time in with Remembrance or Veterans Day. So yes, check out the show notes because we've destroyed it by our descriptions, but it really works.
And that price, if you're feeling as if, ooh, a bit punchy, just like you may have thought that when we talked about the Isotope earlier, don't think of these as standard watches. These have got so much extra work, attention, detail and man hours and labour hours and machining hours just to produce the cases, the dials, all the bits and pieces that elevate this above just being another timepiece on the wrist. So good luck to both of those guys. It's good to see some fantastic British watches, some new designs coming out from both of them. And we'll round out with an email from Jason Hooper.
Indeed. Subject, Miziel self-promotion. Hi guys, hope you're well. Good to see Miziel self-promote. Good work. Jazz.
Yeah, I didn't really know what he meant because that was one of the weeks where I couldn't be bothered with spelling mistakes, so I didn't look at the show notes. But it turned out, after we mentioned that our little friend from New York, Miziel, has been moonlighting with Dave behind the scenes at Raj, and also Raf at Formex, and Jose at Isotope. He included some details in the show notes if anyone wanted to get in touch over in the States, over in that neck of the woods, and wanted to check out these watches, because he has started his own concierge business as a bit of a sideline from doing our Instagram website and show notes. So all the best will in the world to Miz, as long as he makes sure those show notes are on time.
Spelling, Miziel. Spelling. So that is the end of this episode. Remember, check out the back catalogue. There is lots of different episodes out there. There's bound to be one that you've missed or you've not listened to, but some of the more recent ones, the Concorde episode. If you're into your aircraft, if you want to hear from one of the guys that was intimately involved, have a listen. Also, Tim Mancuso. He's a character. He's got some interesting watches and he's got things to say. Check out his episode as well. Links in the show notes. Aside from that, Ricky, though, where can we be found? On our website at scottishwatches.co.uk, on Instagram at
Scottish Watches.
That'll be the one. Congratulations. Please do not DM us. Send us a email if you want us to even remotely think about reading it, replying, possibly reading it out. If you have anything to say, good, bad or indifferent, send it to us. If it's bad, we'll probably ignore it. If it's good, we might say, yeah, we can talk about ourselves being good, but all of that is for the future. So tune in again.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of emails from a company in the UK because I parked my car.
Ricky's just cut out a rant he made about emails. You didn't need to know about it. I had to listen to it, but hey, we're done. So we're out twice a week, every Monday, every Thursday. Usually an interview show. Usually the two of us talking absolute nonsense about watches. Check out the show notes for more accurate details, but probably badly spelt. Other than that...
Maybe I should jump in and tell people what's coming up. So we're going to be speaking to the dial artist, who turns out he's from Scotland, less than 100 miles away from where me and Dave stay. We're going to check the pulse of Andrew Morgan from Andrew Morgan Watches, formerly the talking hand guy from Watchfinder. He's been out on his own for a little while. We want to check if he's still got the stabilisers on or not. And we're going to have George Bamford back by public decree. You guys loved when he was last on, and we're going to make it more of a regular thing, so stay tuned for that one. And there'll be a couple of other little bits and bobs. We have some watches to talk about. We're not allowed to talk about right this second, but come a week's time, we'll have plenty more to throw in your ears.